They say dogs never forget kindness.
But what about betrayal? When Lena closed the door that day, she thought she was just walking away from a chapter of her life. What she didn't know was that her small act of selfishness would come back to her years later through the eyes of a dog she once left behind. Lena had always been the kind of person who wanted a quiet life. She worked from home as a freelance illustrator, living in a cozy one-bedroom apartment at the edge of Savannah. Her days were simple: coffee in the morning, sketching by the window, and watching the world pass by through curtains she rarely opened. Life wasn't exciting, but it was peaceful, and she liked it that way. Then came the breakup. Ethan, her boyfriend of 3 years, packed his things one afternoon and said, almost casually, "You love your work more than people." He left before she could find words to argue. What hurt more than the words was the silence that followed. For weeks, Lena tried to drown the emptiness with work, but even her art started to feel lifeless. That was when she decided to adopt a dog. She found him at a small rescue center on the outskirts of town, a golden retriever puppy with soft caramel fur and curious brown eyes. The shelter volunteer said he'd been abandoned by a family that couldn't afford him. The puppy's name was Max. When Lena reached out, he wagged his tail hesitantly, then leaned against her leg as if deciding to trust her. Something inside her softened that day. She took him home. The first weeks were chaotic. Max chewed on her shoes, barked at shadows, and had accidents on the carpet. But he also followed her everywhere, slept beside her desk while she drew, and looked at her with a loyalty that felt both comforting and undeserved. Slowly, Lena began to smile again, but peace never lasted long in her world. Her younger sister, Tessa, called one evening in tears. Their mother had fallen ill, and the bills were piling up. Tessa had 2 kids, a part-time job, and nowhere near enough savings. "You're the only one who can help, Lena," she said. Lena hesitated. She wasn't wealthy. Her freelance jobs barely covered her rent. But guilt crept in. She'd always been the stable one in the family, the one expected to fix things. So she agreed to take their mother into her small apartment for a few months. When her mother arrived, things shifted fast. The quiet routine Lena loved disappeared overnight. The old woman complained about Max's fur, his barking, his smell. "A dog in the house is chaos," she'd mutter, coughing into a tissue. Lena tried to balance it all: caregiving, deadlines, and a restless dog who suddenly didn't get the attention he once had. Then one morning, her mother tripped over Max while he was running to greet her. It wasn't serious, but it was enough to spark an argument that lasted hours. Her mother's voice trembled with anger. "That animal doesn't belong in a home where people are sick." For the first time, Lena looked at Max and saw him not as comfort but as a problem. The guilt was immediate and sharp, but exhaustion made it easy to ignore. She reached out to Tessa again, asking if she could take the dog temporarily. Tessa refused. Her apartment didn't allow pets. That night, Lena sat awake for hours while Max slept near the couch, unaware of the thoughts circling in her head. By morning, she'd made her decision. She told herself it was only temporary. She drove Max back to the same shelter where she'd found him. He looked confused when she handed over the leash, his tail wagging uncertainly. The volunteer smiled kindly, saying they'd take good care of him. But when Lena turned to leave, she felt something inside her twist. A sound, faint but sharp, made her pause. It was Max whining. She didn't look back. At first, life became easier, quieter again. Her mother recovered, moved back with Tessa, and Lena found herself alone once more. But it wasn't the same kind of peace. Her apartment felt heavier somehow, like the air had changed. The sound of paws on the floor, the soft breathing under her desk, all gone. She told herself she did the right thing, but the thought never truly stuck. Years passed. Lena moved to a new neighborhood, took on bigger art projects, even started teaching workshops. From the outside, she looked like someone who had rebuilt her life perfectly. Yet sometimes, when she'd wake up early and see sunlight spilling across the floor, She'd think of the morning Max used to stretch and yawn beside her. It was small things that reminded her: the sound of jingling keys, the smell of rain, the empty space at the end of her couch.
She didn't talk about it with anyone. People didn't understand guilt over a dog. Then one afternoon, she got a message from a stranger. "Hi, are you Lena Rios? I think you might have owned a golden retriever named Max."
Her heart dropped. The sender was a man named Jordan, who said he worked at a vet clinic downtown. He'd found her name on an old microchip registry and wanted to confirm ownership because Max had been brought in injured after a car accident. Lena froze. She hadn't seen that name or heard it in 5 years. Jordan explained that Max had been adopted after she surrendered him and had lived with an older couple for a few years before the husband passed away. The wife had moved into assisted living, and Max ended up with their neighbor, who'd found him hurt by the roadside that morning. Lena didn't know what to say. She asked if he was okay. "He's stable," Jordan replied.
"But he's not letting anyone near him."
"Except one of our techs," she said. "He keeps looking toward the door, like he's waiting for someone." Lena sat at her desk, staring at her unfinished sketch, her coffee growing cold. Something deep inside her, something she'd buried under work and time, started to surface. She typed one more message.
"Can I come see him?"
That night, she drove through the rain, headlights blurring against wet streets. When she reached the clinic, the waiting room was quiet except for the hum of machines. Jordan met her at the door, his expression careful. "He's in the back," he said softly.
"But
he hasn't responded to anyone yet." Lena followed him through the corridor, her steps slow, almost hesitant.
She didn't know what she was hoping for: forgiveness? Closure?
Maybe just to see if he remembered her. And when she stepped into the small examination room, her breath caught. Max was lying on a blanket, older now, fur streaked with gray around his muzzle. But his eyes, those warm, brown eyes, turned toward her instantly. He didn't bark.
He didn't move at first.
Just stared. Then, very slowly, his tail thumped once against the floor. Lena's throat tightened. That small sound broke something open in her chest. But what came next she could never have predicted. The moment Max's tail moved, Lena felt both relief and something close to panic. It was as if time folded in on itself, 5 years disappearing into that small, quiet motion. She knelt down, not too close, afraid of startling him. Jordan stood silently by the door, watching as if he knew this wasn't a reunion that needed witnesses. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly.
"You remember me?"
Max's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. He lifted his head slowly, his eyes scanning her face like he was searching for proof. Then, with a low whine, he tried to stand. His front paw slipped, and he winced, but before the vet could step in, Lena moved closer, gently placing a hand on the blanket. "It's okay," she said quietly.
"You don't have to get up." He stayed still, breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on her.
There was recognition there, not excitement, not the kind of tail-wagging joy dogs show their favorite humans. This was something quieter, heavier, like he remembered, but hadn't decided yet if he should. Jordan stepped forward and cleared his throat.
"He's recovering, but it'll take time."
"You could sit with him for a while if you want," she nodded, not taking her eyes off Max. For the next hour, she sat beside him in silence. The only sounds were his breathing and the faint hum of the machines. Every so often, he'd lift his head, glance at her, and then rest again. She wanted to reach out, to touch him, to say everything she hadn't said the day she left him behind. But the words didn't come. When Jordan returned, Lena stood up reluctantly. "Can I visit again?" she asked. "Of course," he said.
"But he'll need someone to take him once he's better." Lena hesitated. "You mean, adopt him again?"
He gave a small smile. "If he wants that." That night, Lena lay awake replaying everything in her head. The shelter, the day she left him, the look he gave her. She'd told herself for years it was the right choice, but sitting beside him again, she realized it had always been about her comfort, not his. She visited every day after that.
Sometimes Max would perk up when she walked in.
Other days, he barely moved, tired from recovery. But with each visit, something shifted. The first time she brushed his fur again, his tail moved just a little faster. The first time she laughed, really laughed in months. He leaned against her leg like old times. It felt like a slow undoing of guilt.
Thread by thread, when the vet finally cleared him to leave, Jordan asked, "So, where will he go?"
Lena didn't even pause. "With me," she said. It felt right, even if it also felt terrifying. The day she brought him home again, she stopped outside her apartment door, gripping the leash tighter than necessary. She'd moved since then, a brighter space with wide windows and a small patio. As she opened the door, Max stepped in hesitantly, sniffing the corners, his claws clicking softly against the hardwood floor. He looked older, slower, but there was still curiosity in his eyes. When he finally circled once and lay down near her desk the same way he used to, Lena's eyes stung.
"You remember, huh?"
she whispered, kneeling beside him. This time, she didn't leave. Days turned into weeks, and their routine came back in quiet, ordinary ways. Morning walks by the river, late nights with Max curled up beside her as she worked. Neighbors started to wave when they saw them together, the woman with the golden dog who never left her side. But not everything healed so easily. One evening, Tessa called again, her voice hesitant.
"Mom's been asking about you," she said. "She feels bad about what happened." Lena almost said she was busy, that she couldn't deal with it.
But then she looked at Max, the way he rested his head on her foot, patient and trusting, and realized that forgiveness wasn't something that came wrapped in apologies. It was something you decided to give quietly. She agreed to visit. Her mother's house looked smaller than she remembered. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The old woman was sitting by the window when Lena entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke.
Then her mother said softly, "You brought the dog?"
Lena nodded.
"His name's Max."
The older woman's eyes softened. "He's beautiful.
I was wrong about him.
It wasn't much, but it was enough." They sat together for a long time, and when Max rested his head in her mother's lap, the old woman began to cry quietly. After that day, Lena didn't carry the same heaviness anymore. She still thought about what she'd done, but the guilt didn't sting like it used to. It had turned into something else, a reminder that even broken things could be rebuilt if you showed up again. Months later, Max began slowing down. His walks were shorter, his naps longer.
The vet said it was just age catching up.
Lena tried to prepare herself, but there's no real way to prepare for losing something that once saved you. One spring afternoon, she sat on the patio sketching while Max dozed beside her. The sunlight made his fur glow, and the air smelled of jasmine. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. When she reached out to touch him, his breathing had gone still. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there, her hand resting gently on his back. The world around her was quiet except for a bird singing somewhere in the distance. When the tears came, they were slow, quiet, and oddly calm, not just grief, but gratitude. Later that evening, as she placed his old collar on her desk, she noticed something strange. Inside the small metal tag, where the engraving had faded, there was a faint reflection, her face, blurred by light. She smiled through her tears. "You didn't forget," she whispered.
"And this time, I didn't either." Weeks passed.
She adopted again, not because she wanted to replace him, but because she'd learned what it meant to stay. The new dog was a small husky mix named Arlo, full of energy and mischief. He wasn't Max, but he carried the same warmth,
the same unconditional faith in people. Sometimes when she watched Arlo sleep,
she thought about how life had given her a second chance not to erase the past, but to make peace with it. One morning, she found an envelope on her doorstep. It was from Jordan, the vet. Inside was a photo of her and Max in the clinic, the day he first recognized her. Jordan had written a short note. "He waited for you every day until you came back." Lena framed it and placed it by her window. It wasn't a reminder of loss, but of something deeper, that love once given doesn't vanish just because we falter. Sometimes it waits quietly for us to turn around, and somewhere in the quiet hum of her apartment, she could almost hear the sound of pause again.